At what point does being temporarily depressed turn into a long-term medical condition where your brain's telling you, hey, we've been pretty stressed for a while. So while I'm adapting, you might be feeling pretty disinterested in things, tired, or sad more than you used to. Since I'll just be rewiring my neural circuits, changing things up with how your sugar and cholesterol are saved or used up, and keeping your immune system alert and active in case we need it. I'm a researcher passionate about understanding how much control we have over our mental health. How much is depression genetically determined? Like, are some of us just wired a certain way that makes us more likely to have depression at some point? On the other hand, how much is from the environment? How much do our habits, work, social, and cultural environments affect our mood? How do sex and gender impact the biological pathways activated to overcome stress and depression? To investigate these questions, I studied over 16,000 people aged 45 to 85 in a Canadian biobank and used a tool called polygenic risk scores to estimate each person's lifetime genetic risk of depression. I looked at the relative proportion of these genetic risk scores to other risk factors usually studied with depression, like age, income, and if you smoke cigarettes, using a statistical model. Given my experience in heart disease research, I also thought, wow, depression and heart disease are so commonly found together, and they have so many shared risk factors. So I also included these shared clinical risk factors in my model. What I found was striking. Different variables were associated with depression between the sexes, with larger relative contributions of the clinical risk factors compared to the polygenic risk scores. For females, they had significantly higher odds of depression if they had a history of heart disease, hypothyroidism, or diabetes. But for males, these risk factors were not significant. In contrast, males with high blood pressure had higher odds of depression, but not females with high blood pressure. And lastly, the shared risk factors for depression for both sexes were if they're younger, have lower annual incomes, have a larger waist to hip ratio, or are current or former smokers. The results of this thesis show how important it is to study complex traits like depression through a more holistic, whole body approach, shown by the large effects of these clinical risk factors not in the brain on depression, and how important it is to analyze data separated by sex so we can investigate these systems properly. Depression is not determined by your genetics, and its effects on the body can be reversed. It isn't just in your head, and you can train yourself out of negative physical habits and thought spirals. As a community, we all need to acknowledge the social and medical burden that depression has by destigmatizing and actively addressing the sources and not just dismissing or normalizing the debilitating symptoms. Thank you.